why you and your business should care. I'm going to just give it a minute while people respond to their notifications and get on board here. I want to thank you for coming by my second live stream. I'm still working out some kinks and some bugs and some technical issues, and please bear with me during those. We'll just give it 1 minute. Ransomware has become quite the problem. And hopefully we can identify some quick hits, for some quick successes in configurations and processes and procedures that we can use to make you a more difficult target. All right, so here we go. Ransomware, it's in the news. It's everywhere you go. It's headlines, millions of dollars. It always seems like it's against the big guys. That's not exactly the case. Ransomware, and we'll get into some numbers, attacks small and medium-sized businesses most frequently. So what we're going to do is talk about what ransomware really is. Yeah, everyone has a general idea, right? So ransomware is malware, malicious software that when it enters your system, enters your network, it searches and seeks out and finds the valuable data and then encrypts it, makes it unavailable to you. So you can't use it. Your people can't use it. Your staff can't use it. It's out of your reach. And it can't be recovered with the computing power that we have today. It would take thousands of years, in most cases, to reverse engineer the encryption algorithms. All right, so it's malware, right? Software, you know, that's going to come in. How does it get in? It gets in through vulnerabilities in your devices that are facing the internet, and it gets in through phishing emails. And phishing emails have a habit of, or are very well crafted now, to look exactly like valid emails from either a supplier, a vendor, a billing partner, you know, anybody in your supply chain, and in some cases, even someone within your company, because an exploit will let an attacker in. That attacker can compromise the workstation and get email credentials and email people in the company instructions, you know, send this money here, send this money there. You know, ransomware uses similar attacks. That's business email compromise. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole just yet. So I'm going to try to use more graphics, okay? So the ransomware problem can be summed up. This is a Q2 image that I'm going to share. And it changed a little bit, and I'll share the Q3. And this one is called, like I said, I'm trying to become the smooth operator here. This one is, all right. Here we go. All right. So hopefully everyone can see that. And what this shows us is that, I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can see it all. The distribution of attacks by company size in Q2, according to Coveware, which is a very often quoted and well-renowned gatherer of statistics. They also have other services that can help you get through a ransomware attack. But as they see in the Q2 attacks that they knew about, that they were informed about, companies of under $50 million in revenue accounted for 75.4% of ransomware attacks in the United States. That is a significant portion. This is small, medium-sized business range. And by company size, if you can see, we have up to 1,000 people in a company, and that's easily 80%. So we have 14.7 at 1 to 10 people, and 39.4, 11 to 100 people. Now, why are they picking on the little guys? Well, they know that it's an easy target. They know that IT staffs are small, if they exist at all, and they know that companies don't necessarily budget or fund or have a focused cybersecurity professional on staff. So small and medium-sized businesses need to adapt a more security-oriented mindset every day in processes and procedures to reduce what we call the attack surface, the vulnerabilities. Okay, so ransomware gets in, seeks out your files, downloads an encryption key, encrypts all the data. And I'm going to go through this again. So a vulnerability is exploited. So you have connections to the internet. A vulnerability comes up, whether it's going to be a phishing email, whether it's going to be an unpatched software issue in a system facing the internet. A vulnerability is exploited. Now, in ransomware, that is making contact. So they make contact, exploit a vulnerability, and then they establish a foothold in one machine. You only need to establish a foothold in one machine. Then they elevate privileges and move laterally. They move laterally, and this is where they seek out all the other important data. They do reconnaissance for up to a month. Some places, some of the bigger places, even with full, large cybersecurity teams, ransomware operators have been in there for months. According to one source, this one famous hack was over a year that they were in gathering data and figuring out where the most money is going to come from. But they establish themselves, they move laterally. They identify the data, they download the code that they're going to use to encrypt the data and the key that they're going to use to encrypt the data, and then they encrypt the data. And like I said, you can't, with today's computing power, it would take thousands of years to reverse engineer a well-crafted encryption algorithm. And there's a lot of money in it, and they're well-crafted, and they're hiring mathematicians, and they use encryption that can't be broken. So one of the things that I want to note here is that when they download the code, they're downloading it from somewhere on the internet. They have to be, your compromised workstation has to be able to reach some weird or misspelled domain name in order to reach back to, and this is in the command and control network as we know it, the cyber criminals command and control network. They hack into servers, and they hack into weak web servers and WordPress blogs, and they establish, a presence in those. And this network of hack little services around the world on the internet make up command and control networks. They're not going to rent a prestigious, or rack in a prestigious internet service provider's data center and say, Vlad's ransomware. These things are hard to find. They are found, they are shut down, but they just keep moving. So that's a command and control perspective. What do we care? Because the compromised workstations have to reach back and download code at a minimum. Download the code and the keys to encrypt the data. Also, as they're doing reconnaissance, they have to find the terminal that's trying to hunt through your network. Now, this tells us a bunch of things. And first of all, we'll look at how the internet finds anything. And that's through the domain name service. Oh, let me end my screen share here. Okay, so technical difficulties. So the domain name service, DNS, is the resolution service. It takes the English languagey universal resource locator, URL, and converts it to an IP address. And everything on the internet is found via IP address. So we have a dependency here that we could have an impact on. And that dependency is DNS. Most DNS providers are large providers, like Google is a very popular DNS provider, and their modus operandi is to resolve the request, look up if they have it in their tables, the IP address for this URL, like mcleancybersecurity.com, and return it to the requester. They're not looking necessarily at the destination. They don't care if it's, if it makes sense in any language, because it's a string of numbers, and they said find the corresponding string and IP addresses for this. So there are services. WebTitan has one. Bark actually has a DNS, a filtered DNS service. It's called filtered DNS, and those servers out on the internet that resolve to, and I'm trying to not get really jargony here. These servers have a reputation score for the domains that they're asked to resolve. So if you have a string of random numbers or letters, that don't make much sense, and you can hover over any sender address in your spam email folder to see some of these domains, you can, or these filtered DNS services do not return an IP address. So when the hacked workstation, the broken workstation or compromised workstation reaches out, it asks the local DNS server, can you find, evil.com? And the local DNS server says, I don't have a record for evil.com. Check this guy out on the internet. So you get redirected to servers on the internet. If it's a filtered DNS server, that server will look up evil.com if it has a negative reputation, if it's known to distribute malware. If it has no reputation, it won't return the result. And you get an unresolvable address error from your workstation. And I'm simplifying things here. And, there are some technical details about the handoffs and all I'm not going to get into, because it doesn't really matter. So that is breaking one of the dependencies. So how do the ransomware operators get around that? If they detect they can't resolve that, because they can go to any other domain except their own, because they're on the compromised workstation, they can hard code IP addresses in the compromised workstation to point to different internet-based name servers. We can defend against that. We can filter at the edge through your firewalls, which hopefully you have, that all DNS services have to be or only allowed to the filtered DNS server that we subscribe to. So if they try to make a DNS request to a different address outside the environment, the firewall blocks it. So this is, a bit of it's a layered approach, we call it, defense in depth. And these are just a couple of little tactics. A crafty hacker is going to have a workaround. They can download a few IP addresses so that DNS isn't even required. Things can like this happen, but the more difficult we make it, the more probable it becomes that unless you're a giant target, you're in the Fortune 25, you're in the Fortune 100, and there are millions of dollars in their planned ransom, they might just give up on the small business attack and just move on to the next one that isn't as well defended. So every little step we take, we call it the cyber kill chain. It's a term you sometimes hear. And any step along the way where we can block dependencies that they either can't get around or give up on, it's too much trouble. And this happens, and there's a pyramid of pain metric that we have from a lot of gathered data. It gets to a point where they can overcome this, they can overcome that, they can overcome, and then the more we climb up the pyramid of difficulty that they have to execute their usual tactics, we call it the pyramid of pain. And at the top is the things that their go-to tools. We'll get there. But this is through filtered DNS. We can stop the lateral of the code. Now, if in fact we don't get to do that, well, I think what I'll do here is just go into a couple more. I just want to cover a couple more profiles, and let me. So this is my working the bugs out, and I appreciate your patience. All right, so now I'm not going to do that. So we have some data again from Coveware in Q3 of 2020, the quarter that just ended. The average ransom payment rose to $233,000, 234. It's 233,817 average. And Coveware is a company that helps victim companies navigate the resolution. So they actually negotiate payments. I have no relationship with them other than I know they're a good source of data. They have one, public reports from the largest of the exploits, and two, they have data that they've actually helped negotiate. They have ransom data, firsthand knowledge of it. And the payment of $233,000, maybe you can figure you can get insurance. And the insurance industry is going to catch up, and there are going to be caveats and exceptions in your policies that will give them the excuse for not paying. Oh, you don't have all of your servers patched. You don't have everything, all your T's crossed and I's dotted. There's one there, and therefore the policy says, these conditions must be met, and then you find out you haven't been covered. It's it's not a popular opinion, but it happens. When you think about your medical insurance, the insurance industry makes money by taking in more than they pay out. So, how do ransomware operators really get in? Right. So I talk about things exposed to the internet. There was and this is going to come back down to the fact that not every small, medium-sized business has a full-time IT department, or the people that are working in IT or security, are just inundated constantly with user requests that they're managing, and the fire hose of vulnerability alerts. Within that fire hose of vulnerability alerts, they miss one or two. All right, but there are a couple of big ones, and the biggest one is called the Blue Keep compromise, the remote desktop protocol. And this is, what can you do? Well, we talked about filtered DNS, but even before that, and perhaps, logical flow, I should have covered this first. Patching. Vulnerabilities are found. And when vulnerabilities are found and announced, the software writer, the software manufacturer fixes it. It's incumbent upon every company, every entity, to ensure that these vulnerabilities are patched. And, that's easy, you say. Well, not so much. The remote desktop protocol is a very handy computer-to-computer language that allows somebody like a remote support technician to take over your workstation and take over your display and keyboard from afar so that they can experience the problem that you're reporting for themselves. So RDP is a function of the operating system, and it had a vulnerability. It had a bug, and that bug allowed any Tom, Dick, or Harry on the internet to send an affected machine a specifically deformed string of packets that would give them full rights on that computer without having to log in. If you think back to what I said about a vulnerability being exploited and a foothold established, this is it. And they come in with the ability to execute code, which means that they can create a privileged account on that computer. And a privileged account in a Windows environment can do anything. So they can create more accounts. They can elevate the privileges of the account, the local account on the machine, and then they get to their business of the lateral spread. So RDP had this compromise, and millions of computers on the internet were affected. A patch has been out now for close to a year. And the data shows us, because every once in a while, people sweep the internet for a particular response. I think it was as recent as September, over 250,000 vulnerable machines were still answering RDP requests. Maybe the machines facing the internet that use RDP to connect partners that people use to log on remotely, maybe they've been patched, but you have business partners, you have people with whom you share data. Perhaps they're not patched, or other companies they're connected to are not patched. A skilled cyber attacker will be able to navigate all these connections. So it matters that there are a lot out there. But the first thing for you to do, the most obvious, is make sure that your systems are patched. And that goes a long way. It takes out one attack vector, as we call it. And the attack vectors I'll share this here. This is Q3 data. Let's see if we can get this. Here we go. So here we can see the attack vector of, and I don't know if you can see my mouse. I went through the problem, the trouble of opening that. Okay. So here, the attack vector, you can see RDP compromise in Q4 2018 was 80%, 90% of attacks. As recently as Q3 2020, still well over half, probably 60%, according to this graphic. Ransomware operators are people. They're taking the path of least resistance. If you don't have to go through great gyrations to get access into a vulnerable system, take the easy path. Give it a shot. Maybe you extort 40,000 out of them. There's a story there. And here you can see that email phishing, where users are tricked into clicking a link or opening an email that triggers the download of code to the user machine. Email phishing and RDP compromise make up the vast majority of attacks. So it's incumbent upon us. We really want to make sure that we patch what we can. All right, this time we won't talk to that slide. There we go. And so that is RDP compromise. It's prevalent, it's easy, and that's a support staff, support partner issue that you have to address. There are, let's see, in Q2, because you're not alone, and I just want to, there are big numbers here, and everyone's getting hit with ransomware. Just to give you an idea of the kinds of attacks that have been successfully perpetrated in, let's see, I believe this, yeah, this was, when did I make this? Q2. I scoured some headlines, put some news stories together, and I came up with Q1 and Q2 cases here. And what I'm going to do is share this with you for a quick look. I believe this is it. So as you can see, there are some big numbers here. And this was victims that made the news and the amount of ransoms that were extorted. Let's see. Oh, here we go. All right. So we have damages that have been added. When a company's been out of service for a while, damage of being out of service was added in. The numbers here are stunning, and some of them, I believe this was around the time that Garmin was hit, and Garmin was hit for 10 million. I think they paid out 5.5. Cognizant, an IT service provider in April, was hit badly, and they lost $50 to $70 million in revenue, ransom, and lingering damage of not being able to offer services, and perhaps losing customers. So that is, and I just even last night I looked up another series that showed 2020 notable incidents, and maybe 3 or 4 of them made were also on my list, and they had another giant list of very big and expensive compromises. So we know it's a problem. I think I've established that. I'm beating this for a reason, because you got to do something about it. So the ransomware, and there's something, another bit of jargon here, remote access Trojan, or RAT. The Trojan is just like the mythological wooden horse. It appears to be one thing, actually has a different payload in it, and it gets into your network. So you can train your users, don't click the link, don't open the email, you're not inheriting any money from a prince in Nigeria, you're just not. So don't go there, don't open it. But these things still get clicked because someone walks up to a desk. In these days, your kids are about to light a curtain on fire. Anything can happen, and you accidentally click a link. We have, the question, why does the network work for the attacker? And this is that cyber kill chain. If we can identify steps along the way, we can put up blocks and we can thwart the attack. So we want to be able to detect malicious emails. There are email services. Proofpoint comes to mind. Barracuda comes to mind, where out in their server, their hardened specific function server, they can render attachments safely. So you view them as if they're a static JPEG, and you don't download the image data, and you keep everything on the outside of the network. Those are some great defensive steps to take for cleaning email. Now, is Microsoft 365, O365 on the internet as secure? Microsoft has a reputation of hitting the target and then lagging somewhat behind in their abilities with regards to security. So, word of caution, you have to do some research into how current their cyber hygiene is and what they do to protect you, more than, hey, we have Windows Defender. Use it. I mean, it's better than nothing. And actually, recently, Windows Defender got some great marks. So there is that. But there are also, bits of software, malware detecting agents that enable your machines to protect themselves. Now, I guess I want to jump back around a little bit and talk about, we're talking about ransomware and the fact that they really get around easily. But how, in God's name, do they persist? Or how can they get these payments without getting caught? Why have they evaded the CIA, the NSA, CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure, Cybersecurity Infrastructure System Agency? Geez, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank there, but I'm live. How do they avoid getting caught? Cryptocurrency. Bottom line, cryptocurrency has really added fuel to the fire here, because it makes it easy for a cyber criminal to get payment out of, someone has to buy Bitcoin or other digital currency and deliver it to a specific wallet that disappears the second the money's withdrawn. And so cyber currency is one of the great enablers of ransomware because it is so difficult to crack. It does its security thing very well. The blockchain theory works really well. It also helps this industry thrive and survive. With cryptocurrency, in case you don't know, there are no central authorities, no central bank. All transactions are untraceable. There are no national rules associated with bank, and no money laundering regulations that they adhere to. And that really makes things difficult for everyone who's trying to provide services and protect their small and medium-sized business. The other thing that's been going on, that's of interest to the IT world, is everything is a service. You can, get email as a service. You can get security as a service, infrastructure as a service, code as a service, infrastructure as a service. Everything can be purchased. Somebody's got something out there. They're modeling hardware, software systems. And the ransomware industry now has ransomware as a service. You don't actually have to invent the tactic for exploit. Somebody's already done that. They've hit a bunch of companies. They have a command and control network out there. And they may be content just splitting revenue with the next wannabe ransomware king. So they rent out the capacity of their command and control network, and somebody who perhaps has purchased a list of IP addresses that answer the RDP packet in the way that broadcasts it's going to be an easy score. You have somebody coming along on the dark web, buy a list of 25 names for $10 or whatever it's going for these days, and sign up with evil.com's ransomware as a service, and then start working against your intended victim. They do this on a revenue share. There was, within the last 3 weeks, I think it was 3 weeks, it's, pandemic days, there was an ad out on the dark web where one operator of a command and control network had created I think it was a Bitcoin wallet with $1 million in it, trying to entice the skilled hackers to come use their network and do revenue shares. And it was a real thing. You may have seen it in the news, and hackers entice newbies or, other hackers with $1 million in a digital currency wallet. So it's a very active community. And, I think perhaps you should be scared by this point. I'm going to lay off the fear factor. And I didn't mean it, it's just bad. So what are we doing in the cybersecurity world to protect small and medium-sized businesses? Well, one, we need to make sure that systems are patched. Can't stress that enough. And you have a business to run, whether it's a law firm, whether it's a brewery, whether it's, a manufacturer of car parts, you have a business to run. And you haven't been hit yet, but you're on the list. I'm sure you're on a list somewhere. So you can have your IT people, look for the RDP vulnerability. You can have your IT folks check your email solution. If you have an email server in-house, you might want to enlist the the likes of a Proofpoint or Barracuda, email as a service or email relay, email gateway, and do that. There are other technologies, secure internet gateway technologies, that become the first point of contact with anything leaving your network. And in those, even encrypted traffic can be decrypted, inspected, and re-encrypted before sending it on its way. Zscaler has a purpose-built, and they were way out in front on this kind of service. I had, for a previous employer, I had rolled out their proxy as a service. Everybody surfing the internet had to go through their proxy. You had very granular content control, which was great, and one of the things that we needed to do. And the security that's associated with that, if you think about, making a DNS request to a garbage network or a garbage domain, that's kind of thing. A secure internet gateway will also filter that off. And you can still, for layers of protection, have your filtered DNS provider out there as well. But the secure internet gateway is more capable. It inspects traffic more thoroughly, at a different level, and I won't get into the technical detail there. And I'm just reviewing everything I've said. I'm trying to keep it non-technical, but it's more thorough inspection of traffic and very secure. These things tend to get a little pricey, but you never know when a reseller or aggregator may come along with a pretty good deal. So I just want to check some notes here. Oh, and another thing, there are a lot of unpatched systems out there, and there are often, it's not just staff not doing their job. It's things happen. Companies go out of business, and a well-renowned information security authority, authoritative guy that I know and listened to a bunch of webinars and actually took one of his classes. He relayed this story where it might have been NASA or some other governmental agency. No, it wasn't NASA. It was one of the research arms. They had a Windows 97 PC still on the network, and his company, one of the analysts in his company said, "Aha, we have a machine that's vulnerable, can't be patched. Microsoft isn't supporting it. It's got to go." And the problem was, because this is the realm of legacy apps, it was the only system that could control the $5 million electron microscope. The company that wrote the code that controlled the electron microscope was out of business. The only way to get rid of that thing was to get a new $5 million electron microscope. Legacy apps happen. So a security professional can go through, if you have some legacy apps like this, and come up with other ways to defend against that. In terms of processes and procedures that can help, there have been cases where attacks have been thwarted because someone noticed a lot of data was leaving. We call it data exfiltration. And if you know that your finance server is never going to have to transmit files to an IP address in Asia, and yet you implement systems that can see that, or that can report on that happening, you can start looking for the other indicators of compromise and shut them down. So we have normal traffic flows. We have systems and ways to protect them. We have the inevitability of compromise. Can you make something 100%? Do we have the technology to make something 100% secure? No, we don't. And I'll break this example out every time. Microsoft Windows 10 operating system, I believe, is 53 billion bytes of code, 53 gig. And it's been written over years by thousands of computer scientists, computer engineers, software developers, programmers, and they have their styles. They have written all, they write things that work with other code. It's impossible to have all of these things give a result that's bug-free. Bugs will happen. And if you think about the enormity of what's really going on behind the screen, bugs will happen. And it's incumbent upon us to identify them and then apply patches when they do happen. As far as indicators of compromise that don't cost anything, we can look at who logs in and when. If somebody is always logging in at 7 p.m. and they know they haven't, if they get a report in the morning that asks, we saw you log in at 7 p.m. Did you log in at 7 p.m.? And no, I didn't. Somebody did in that identity, or somebody did on this machine. And it becomes a process thing where everyone can certify. You can resolve and correlate all logins to specific people. If you have logins on a machine that are out of sync with your time zones, if you have new users being created, then that are not authorized, then you can tell you have a bit of a problem. And you can start, you've detected a problem, and now you can start your remediation of the problem. So we have specific traffic filters, we have processes at our disposal, and you can think of these and talk about them with your IT staff. But the knowing when things should happen, if your employee onboarding process is buying a laptop for them the week before they start, or having IT configure it by Wednesday before the Monday they're going to start, the identity, the user ID gets configured. User IDs get configured on a particular day of the week, and you can look and have a report, running against your system that identifies when users are created. And if users are created out of the realm of the normal window of time IT gets around to configuring users, that could be an indicator that somebody's in your network and trying to spread laterally. So these kinds of processes are things that don't cost a whole lot of money. Now, in a larger environment, we have security incident and event management systems, or security information and event management systems, depending on who you're talking to, that look at the traffic outbound, that gather a lot of data, and some of them are coupled with threat intelligence. In other words, there are these, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Administration or Agency, CISA. They collect data. There are threat databases that security providers can reference, and they can correlate events in your network and check them against known attack vectors and known attack behaviors and say, we have an issue here. These systems can be expensive. They could require full-time security staff to constantly address issues that are raised, and they're not for the faint of heart, but they exist and they're out there. So we can employ those to inspect traffic outbound. Now, if you don't have a full-time security staff, you have a partner, you can get a program like this running through a syslog server, and those are often all not that expensive to implement. In 2005-06, I worked in an environment with really well-developed syslog servers. A lot of traffic was logged, a lot of incidents were logged. It was a very secure network, and we did this at the network level, and we correlated how traffic flowed, and we had those sign-in things. So it was all good. And this helps block, when you can identify something, delete a user ID, or do that investigation. It helps reduce your exposure to ransomware. Another thing that is a real quick hit, enable two-factor authentication. A lot of people hate it, but if they get it, if they have the app on, they download the two-factor authentication app on their phone, try to log into a server, they've got to enter a code. Not everyone's favorite, but everyone gets over it pretty quickly. And for the little bit of resistance that you may encounter rolling this out, it goes a long way, because an attacker is never going to have, Joe's phone, or the manager of the factory floor. He's never going to have that code. So enabling two-factor authentication throughout your environment is an immediate workaround, an immediate step you can take to reduce your probability that you get totally owned by ransomware. If we can, turn off remote desktop, turn off the RDP service on all your computers, if you can. This is, it reduces the flexibility and support options, but if you are serious and have a lot, and we all do, we all have, a lot riding on cybersecurity, it's something to do. All right, so we have two-factor authentication, we have network level authentication, and at the edge, we talked about someone, a computer on your network answering an RDP packet request. If you don't have any remote connections coming in through RDP, and I really encourage you to not use that, then you can block RDP at the firewall. So no RDP packets come in from the internet. If you can have them go out, but you just block all originating, all RDP requests originating from the internet get blocked. So that's a quick fix. Have your IT team block RDP. In the email gateway services, you can block links and attachments. You can just have them stripped off. The ones that do get through, have them. You can have everything in a hardened email server, and that's an immediate thing to do. So I am looking. I can't see any messages. I have no idea, because I only see two streams out to Facebook and YouTube. I hope this helps. And I hope it was focused enough for you to glean some valuable information. Again, ransomware is huge. It's out there. It's a very large industry. And right now, insurance should help. User, government entities, hospitals are under attack and have been held up for ransom, even in spite, to get COVID data back. And we've outlined a number of steps we can take. First and foremost, patching, logging data, and we can get into some more of the programs, like the cybersecurity framework. The National Institute of Standards and Technology has the cybersecurity framework, which outlines steps to take to create a cybersecurity program. And you may or may not, well, you probably don't have a security program defined, but you have processes and procedures in place, whether it's just even logging in, simply logging in, or you have processes and procedures in place that can be put into the context of a framework that can show you where you could improve your approach to cybersecurity to continually reduce your exposure to it. Now, I see I only have 3 minutes left, so I can't necessarily cover the pyramid of pain, but I think next week I'll touch on okay, well, you know what? I'll think about what would have the most impact, and I'll come back either next Tuesday or Friday. Have a wonderful, happy, and safe Thanksgiving. Don't travel, and good luck. I'd love some feedback. You want to send me a message if you sat through any part of it or all of it. I'd appreciate that. And until we speak, take care.